Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. I am back from vacation, and that means we're going to be starting back strong with another gold medal match, this time from the Herne's Cup, I think that's how you pronounce that, between Mark Wilkie and Tom Crickmore. Now, another thing I want to kind of make is a change to how I kind of run videos here, and what I want to try to focus on are real turning points in every fight. What that means is I'm not going to be saying adaptation so much anymore. Instead, I'm going to be saying turning point a lot more. And specifically, I want to focus on moments in a fight where the score had a drastic change and someone really either pulled ahead or came back from behind and basically made some real impact. And what that allows me to do is talk a little bit more about the blend of not just the techniques that you're seeing, but also how they interact with the rule set. And it'll maybe justify a little bit the fact that I'm going to cover probably on the whole less exchanges per video than I normally would have. That also gives me the opportunity to always put the original source material down in the description. I've been asked to do that a few times, but no one's really gotten mad at me for it. But I feel like it's something I should be doing pretty much all the time now and will be doing all the time in the future. But with that, let's get a look at that first exchange. So for our first exchange, we have what I call all the time the footwork feeling out period. Now, maybe I haven't called it that before, but basically it is the situation where both fencers are moving in and out with their footwork, trying to figure out what it is that their opponent will react to. And the reason for this is that they just don't know yet. They don't know if every time they come forward, their opponent is going to come blitzing at them. They don't know if they're going to run away every time. And what we see in this exchange is we see blue come in with some pretty heavy, aggressive footwork, and then just sort of stall out a little bit, banking in their mind, okay, red fencer isn't necessarily going to charge me every time. And then red fencer comes forward for a good bit, pushes blue all the way across, and then doesn't really do much with it. But the first person to take a real solid action here is red, and what they realize is that when you're playing the footwork game and you're moving in and out, you have to make sure not to get a little bit too close. Otherwise, you might trigger a reaction that you yourself are not prepared for. So red, seeing blue coming a little bit forward, or maybe just retreating a little bit in a sense that he's not really going to defend or attack, red gets a lightning quick hand shot straight to the top of the glove and then is able to back away free and clear. But this is also a great time to talk about the rule set because this shot awards red 2 points. So this is a 3-2 system. And the thing about a 3-2 system is that there's one really distinct way that it differs from, say, a 2-1 afterblow system. And that is the fact that you can only ever get 1 point on an afterblow, but all clean shots are going to give you 2 or even 3 points. This means that clean shots get a little bit more of an emphasis than something like an afterblow does. And it also means that theoretically, you're rewarding more clean fencing than you are something like a situation where someone goes for your leg and you bop them on the top of the head. AKA, in this system, that would only get you 1 point, which is still a point, and it can be the difference between winning and losing, but a clean shot to the hands giving you 2 means that it's significantly more impactful. So after that first exchange, red got a pretty decent lead with a clean 2 points, and in this exchange, we're going to see red fencer extend that lead even more with another really nice exchange where they get 2 clean points, but this time they have to do a lot of work in order to defend themselves. So what we see here is we see blue come in, basically going in for some kind of feinted offense. What they really want to do is they really want to back red into a corner, get them into a defensive posture, and then that was probably when they were going to really execute their true attack. But in this case, as they're coming forward, red recognizes that blue is not presenting any real significant threat yet, snipes him real quick on the hands, and then ducks off to their left side and throws up that hanger in order to try to defend themselves from the afterblow they know is coming, because at the end of the day, when you try to hand snipe somebody when they're coming forward, you can know for sure that the second they feel that hit on their hand, they're going to fire off the attack that they have pre-programmed in their head, because that's just the smart thing to do. And in an afterblow format, if you get hit on the hands and then you manage to hit your opponent in the head, well, that's 1 point that you're going to get, as opposed to 2 points you're going to lose if you don't make it there in time. So it is a very smart idea to throw that response cut after they got hit in the hands from blue, but they didn't quite make it because red did a great job throwing up that hanger and defending themselves. So another clean 2 points for red, and now we have a pretty commanding lead. A commanding lead of 4 points, however, that doesn't necessarily mean the end of the fight, as it might in other rule sets, because again, theoretically, blue has the opportunity to make 3 points in just one exchange. So in order to make a comeback from this little bit of a point deficit, blue is going to have to start going for some deep targets. And in this exchange, we see red set up a very nice baited attack in order to draw out that deep attack from blue and capitalize on it. So when you know that someone is going to be going for deep targets, one of the best things that you can do is basically take a step into their range, maintain a high guard, because you know that that attack is going to go either to your chest or upper head, and you can basically wait for that attack, parry it, and then repost it, knowing that your opponent had to maybe commit that little extra bit in order to get to your juicy targets. And that's, again, what red does here. They come forward, they stand still right here in a cron, baiting their opponent into throwing that high attack, which they do. They parry it immediately and throw that nice left Sverk. There's only one small, I guess you can't even really call it a mistake, but small technical error here, and that is the fact that when red throws their left Sverk, they throw it low. Now, there's nothing wrong with throwing a low left Sverk, even in this situation, but the problem comes when blue, who immediately feels once again them get hit on the arm, knows that their opponent is open in the spot they just came from, and throws their own right Sverkow right into that little hole pocket onto the top of the shoulder, which gets called a high priority hit. So the issue here is that this was a turning point in really two distinct ways. One, if red fighter had just thrown their counter left Sverkow to the high line, they could have at least made it a double and gotten no points and maintained their lead, or probably more likely had landed an attack to their opponent's head, getting them 3 clean points, because their sword would have been basically stuck in a position where they could have very easily defended any sort of afterblow. And a 3 points at this juncture would have almost certainly sealed the deal for red fencer. But because blue was able to get in that afterblow to a high priority target, instead of losing out on 2 clean points, they instead gained 1 point and started chipping away at the lead that red had established in these earlier exchanges. Now, so far in this fight, we have seen red fencer really been doing a very good job of landing shots to the hands or the low line in general, and then trying to cover their high line for any afterblow situation. We saw that first exchange or second exchange where they sniped the hands and then went into that hang and parry, and then just the previous exchange where they threw that counter left Sverkow, but then just weren't quite able to cover that high line after the afterblow. And in this situation, we see something very similar once again. We see red fencer come in with a feinted high attack, convert it into a low under straight to the bottom of the hands, at which point they then pivot from that section where they're basically standing in a kind of right hanger, but with their sword a little bit towards the center, and they just try to shove it over to the right side to defend themselves. And this time, it really looks like they are able to defend their high line from that afterblow, resulting in another clean 2 points. But this is another critical juncture, not just because red fencer got 2 clean points, but specifically because what we're seeing here is a solidification of red's game plan. If you could say that red's game plan up until now has been snipe the hands, cover the afterblow, they've had some pretty great success in the past, and this is probably the best success that they could hope to have, because at this point, blue fencer has seen that happen 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a row. What that means is that blue fencer needs to really pull out a different sort of concept if they're going to try to win this fight, because so far their techniques of maybe get hit on the hands and go for the high priority afterblow has barely been getting them any points, maybe 1 or 2 here or there. And of course, every time their opponent gets a clean shot to the hands, they extend that lead to the point where it would now take 2 afterblow exchanges to make up for it. So up till now, red has had a pretty commanding lead, but these last 2 exchanges that I'm going to cover are actually the last 2 exchanges of the fight, and they both feature a pretty heavy point swing in the favor of blue. However, when we watch the exchanges, what we're going to see is that they were pretty close, and the calls really came down to the wire. So in this particular exchange, we see blue go in with a bit of a shield how. It's not quite flat, it's not quite edged down, and it looks like it tickles the front of the mask of the red fencer. However, after this happens, red parries the blue's sword off to the side, throws a nice little counter left Sverk, manages to get into the fleshy bits at the top of blue's shoulder, and halt is called. Now, there are a couple different ways that this exchange can go. It can say for sure that maybe some judges just didn't see blue's attack land, but as we see here in the footage, the one judge immediately facing the side did call blue's hit, which means that blue has a high priority hit there. But the question now is whether or not red's afterblow is considered in tempo. And that is a very, very important distinction to make, because if blue gets 3 clean points, well, they can basically erase the lead that red has had up till now. And if the afterblow comes in, well, it goes from 3 points to 1 point. And that is a really stark difference. So in this particular format, the 3-2 format, we can see how it's certainly more exciting to have situations where anyone can come back from basically any point difference. However, this also means that the judging has to be extremely precise, because any exchange that is maybe judged inaccurately can be the difference between winning, losing, or covering an extremely large amount of points. Now, in this exchange, the exchange was ultimately ruled that blue landed their shot, which I believe they did, and that the red afterblow is out of tempo. And depending on your definition of tempo, that certainly makes a lot of sense. At the end of the day, tempo is actions, not necessarily time. And the action that red took was to try to parry the attack and then to throw the counter left spheric, which means that, technically speaking, it was 1 tempo after they were already hit. So in this exchange, blue gets 3 clean points, and now we have actually a really tight score and a really important final exchange. So now it's the final exchange, and the scores are close enough that either fencer can win, and it's pretty exciting. But what we see here in this particular exchange now is, as opposed to blue, who had just gotten a clean 3 points off of a shot to the head on the initial action, it is now red's turn to throw that initial shot. And there's a couple of reasons why this shot from red is a pretty smart decision, and also a pretty well executed one. So if you are in this situation where you're only up on a couple of points, but you know for sure that an afterblow can only get somebody 1 point, which is not enough to close the gap or make someone the winner, it behooves you very much to go for a deep target on your initial attack, because if you both hit each other, double, no points, you win. If you hit high and they go low, you get 1 point and you certainly win. And on the off chance that you throw a high strike and they throw a high strike and you both get stuck in the middle, well, now you're in a situation where you can maybe get something out of that, but chances are the thing you're going to get out of that is not a full 3 points. So that means that you're in a pretty good spot to maintain your lead. So that's exactly what red does. They go in for that first strike, and blue makes a bit of a mistake. They clearly anticipated red to come in with a big strike, and they went into a kind of cron parry. The only problem was they started their cron parry from a low plow, and the issue is that that is a whole lot of distance to travel with the strong of your blade before you are completely safe. So the strike that red throws is one that basically tries to lever over the top of the guard a little bit and tap his opponent right on the top of the noggin, meaning that in order to defend yourself with that cron parry, you had to get the strong of your blade and your crossguard past the top of your head, otherwise you weren't going to make it in time. And then again, it's a lot of distance to travel, too much distance to travel, which results in red getting a clean 3 points, and then they get into that high to high bind in which they stall out the fight, get into the grapple range, and completely stuff any response that blue might have had. Not necessarily that it would have mattered, because even if blue had managed to throw an afterblow in time after getting hit on the top of the head, it still would have resulted in either no points or 1 point for red fencer, which both cases would have been enough for them to win. So that is the end result. Red fencer wins, and they do it on a pretty nice demonstration of an initial just Zornhouse straight down the pipe. It was a great fight. There was a lot of cool adaptations, a lot of things to learn from, and hopefully people are happy with the slightly less exchanges being covered, but the slightly more depth to those exchanges being covered. And if you like it, feel free to like, subscribe, do the thing, and I will be back on Thursday with another video.